Hello, welcome back to Garrison Talks, episode X. I'm just gonna start saying X because that way I can't say
That's
I
right.
didn't forget. Because X can be any number, so we can just plug it in whatever. But as always, I'm your host here, Adam Slaver, joined with Matt and a new face of the cast, Kaler Nicholson. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great.
Doing well, thank you.
So, Kaler, your new face of the podcast. Introduce us a little bit to yourself. How long you play Legion? What do you play? Et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Started this year. So happy to get on board with the indie group. In fact, through the local store, I heard of this group of people, and that's how I got in there. I think it was just a shop owner was like, "Hey, who plays Legion around here?" And what a great group of people who I was able to hook up with. Right. So it was actually at the start of the year, going to the first tournament. Drove with Matt all the way there, and he showed me the ropes in the what we call the competitive scene, right? But split the core box with my buddy Spud, and he's been complaining about what is it, CIS ever since, right? So club and play, and no, but it's been awesome playing this year with the group. So
Yeah, you started pretty much the same way I did because I just forced my way in after after a tournament once, so that's always fun. Um, so we got a couple fun topics today. We'll start with our main topic, I guess, the
Main
line
topic.
between competitive and casual play, and like when it gets to be too much, how to keep the game fresh, avoiding burnout, et cetera, that kind of stuff. We'll take a second after that to talk a little bit about our new fun, a little hot seat. Basically, a little debate in an episode, which is always fun. And then we'll probably wrap up talking about the two new battle forces that came out from ministravaganza, and we'll save the units for next week or next episode, I should say. Um, so yeah, but first let's take a second and go through all of our announcements and everything. Matt, I believe you have something that has to do with painting and competitions.
I do. I'm severely late on announcing that. Without further ado, I know I've had a couple people asking me. We had some really, really great painting submissions that I will be posting to the Discord, um, or the Discord and the Facebook hopefully when this episode launches. But we have two winners actually that I wanted to recognize. So our top winner was Christopher Dobbs Jr. He submitted a really, really wonderfully painted land speeder that we'll post pictures of. And then I also wanted to do an honorary kind of winner just because we had so many great submissions. Wanted to make sure I could give as many people credit as I could. So Chris Hershey as well for his Boba Fett that he painted. So we'll be reaching out to you guys here tonight. Actually, I'll be sending off that email. And so we'll get you guys' addresses. We'll send you out those custom cards. And stay tuned for more painting contests in the future. So check those out on our social medias. And stay tuned to our website, Indianapolis Garrison, for more events and more stuff.
Yeah. And then, as always, check in over on our Twitch, over at Indie Garrison, and then of course YouTube, as you said, Indianapolis Garrison on YouTube as well for more videos, podcasts. Hopefully, we're going to stream some more of the Invader League games, which has been going on for a little while. Um, Outside of that, I think that's like everything for unless I'm forgetting something.
We do have another store championship tournament coming up.
Yes, that's right.
We have our next SmackDown is coming up in November. I believe it's November 4th. So tickets for that are live, so you can register. If we get up to 32 players, we will be handing out 2 invites. If we get less than that, we'll just be handing out 1. But we just had our last one that wrapped up with our winner, Ty Neff from the north side of Indy. So he ended up winning that with his Vader T21 spam. So we'll be holding another one of those to try and get as many people world invites as we can.
And I do also want to say on that topic, I believe that the north side, Ty's group there. 317 is having their store championship at Sinclair Games on. I believe they moved it to November 18th. Does that
Yes,
sound
I think
right?
that's right.
All right. Yeah, so they moved that to November 18th, so that's something to look at too over on our Discord. You just sign up for that and try and win a Worlds invite.
Yes, we have a long list of tournaments coming up in November and October. I mean, there's like 7 or so. So yeah, definitely jump in if you're looking for more events, or reach out to one of us and we can kind of point you to stuff in the local and semi-local area. Cincinnati, Dayton,
Yep.
and Kentucky, Indianapolis. So
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
and
Join
then
in because it's so easy. It's so much easier to keep track of what's going on.
yeah. I say also keep up with your local group and everything, because I know after they posted that article about store championships, like start November, September, whatever it was, I've heard about a lot of other new store kits going out in circulation and everything. Because I know, like our local store, for example, started with 1 kit, and then started September we got up to 3. So there's a good chance that a lot of local stores and scenes are getting more kits. So always just keep track of that and everything. Um,
absolutely.
and if you're interested in winning one, it's always something to look out for. And there will be plenty of chances going into next year, because Adepticon is end of March, so like probably have January, February to win one if you want it. But yeah, I think that's a good way to start talking about a line between a little bit about competitive and casual play, when it gets too much and whatnot. So I guess to start, what is your guys' definitions of competitive and casual play? Like, where does competitive play start to become casual and vice versa?
Hmm. I think for me that line's almost a wavelength rather than a line. I think most players at the base of it want to be competitive, at least in that they want to show up and be able to play a list or an army that's not just going to completely get frazzled and wiped off the table. Like,
Yeah,
no one wants to play a mishmashed gun line, or a skew list or something that's just they pick up all their units round 2. um, People at least want to play an evenly balanced game. And so I think for me, casual versus competitive is really more about how often you're playing, rather than like the type of army you're playing. Like, sure, not everyone wants to play at tournaments, and that's great. But I also know people who don't play at tournaments who play every week.
Hmm.
And to me, I would still say that they're a competitive player, even though they would say that they play casually. They might have a skill level of X height or whatever it would be. And so I would still consider that that person is competitive. But the balance is trying for me is figuring out like how often do I play versus what I want to play, and is there balance in that, and can I play a fun list, or as Knopf would put it, it's not a competitive list, and then he
and
wins
then go,
for a
win his
local event
invite.
with it.
Yep.
So
That's funny. I agree with that. I think what's interesting to me is I think the participants hopefully decide what type of vibe and what type of game it is, and it can change at any time, right? Like for us, we drive every day, but driving can be one of the most competitive sports out there. So, no matter what you're doing, you can just choose what type of event it's going to be. And I think for the most part, something's got to be on the line for it to be considered competitive too. So I think that's one of the driving examples there for a reward, or you're buying into something right now to kind of incentivize it to be worth more than just
Just having fun.
bragging rights,
Yeah.
right? So, one of the examples I can think of is at least when it changes. Like I've started a game and it's very casual, but rounds 3, 4, someone sees something and then you can tell they're playing the game differently, or something like that, right? So I think it can change, but I think the best Legion experience is when both players are on the same page, right? It's shared between, and that makes for the best game.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with all of that. Just because it's like it's weird because, as you guys are saying, like competitive and casual can become one and the same very very quickly, depending on who you're playing, what you're playing, etc. etc. But I think for me personally, the line between competitive and casual is when you're essentially building lists. I think Matt kind of touched on this too, but it's like if you're building a list to just kind of like have fun, like I've built plenty of lists that I've had just a lot of fun with that I wouldn't consider taking to like competitive tournaments and stuff like that. Um, and then whereas when I'm going saying like, okay, I'm going to go to a tournament like this weekend, for example, I am bringing a list that I know functions well together and that like you put time into and everything. Um, and you know that it will beat a lot of like the things out there because you start. It's a bit of a roundabout way from what I'm about to say because I'm great with words if you haven't noticed already.
You're doing great, Adam.
Is I think the difference becomes when you stop just looking at your own list and start considering other people's lists because it's like you can make a very thematic list with like Rogue One or Rogue One like Chic list that kind of thing, and have it play very well together. But you don't consider like saying like, oh, I'm just gonna lose the three ATSTs and that kind of thing. Um, so like you start considering what other people are bringing. I think
Yeah,
is
I think
where my line starts.
I think I see that too. Definitely in a lot of players who are stepping into the community and trying to build list as well. Like, one of the most common questions is, what's the strongest list? What's really working well? What's the meta? And because the players don't want the experience of playing what they think is fun and then just stepping into it and being smashed. And it's like it's a fun list and it works well and it has efficiencies. But if there's two or three hard counters that everyone's playing, no one wants to walk in and just be smashed by it. So even if they're not a competitive-ish player, they have to essentially think in a competitive mindset because if they show up to an event, they don't want to get their head kicked in.
Yeah, exactly. Um, crap. I had where was I? Sorry, I had something
Like
else in
it's
my
an
mind for
elevator
like the
music
next
right there
part.
for Adam.
Why did I just? I'm blinking out really hard right now.
You're good, buddy.
Next thing for competitive and casual. So what? Okay, so the next thing that would be on that same topic is what makes a unit considered casual versus competitive, if at all, if that's a thing? Because I know we were talking a lot about this earlier today in our Discord, but there's like, where do you start looking at a unit being like a quote unquote competitive unit versus a casual unit, or does that exist?
Well, I think that's a good question. Kaler, how do you, like, when you're list building, what do you think about for units? Like, as someone who's a little bit newer, both of you guys are
Right.
a little bit newer to the scene. Like, what do you think about for that? I guess since I'm saying that since you guys both came in around the same time
Yeah. So I
as the
think
elder.
I think when you guys were talking about list building, I, I still lean more in terms of when you're playing the game, decision making and how you're playing the game determines more along the lines of like if it's a competitive or casual game. But I think when you're looking at list building, I think stats have a lot to do with determining, at least, or that's driving a lot of people's opinion about how a unit is performing. Um, Personally, I see through that a little bit because for me, when I'm building the list, I go by my personal playtime, especially if I'm going for a tournament right now. I'm trying to build and bring something that I'm more comfortable with playing
Mm,
because I know how those units perform against others. Whereas I think a lot of people who have experience with all of them, they're able to get more out of how a unit's particularly performing in tournaments across the country, or they have a better idea where it sets in a meta. But whereas for me, someone who's a little bit newer, I'm looking at a particular unit and determining my knowledge about its matchups and not necessarily its performance across, um, metas or whatnot.
yeah, I think that's a really good answer.
Yeah, because it's
And
like,
you're going to trigger Adam a little bit talking about tournament
I
stats.
know. I'm
'Cause
sorry.
I was waiting for my time. Because one of my personal pet peeves, that's come up a lot in our chat is that I absolutely despise people that use tournament results and like statistics as the reason for X or Y is good or bad. Because what that the term there is results based analysis, where you're looking at like you're drawing conclusions based off of how something performed instead of like actually looking at the thing,
Right.
which I
which is
think is
usually,
wholly incorrect.
yeah, and
Because
I think really that's usually looking into a window of like, hey, at this particular event that was limited to 40 or 50 people who consistently traveled to all of these events, this is what performed well. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, but that's, one corner of the globe. So yeah,
yeah, and then
for
you've
sure.
also and then the other thing is that like the one of the things that we don't have with tournament statistics as a whole is a lot of external factors because all you get looking at win rates is how much something has won. You don't get to look at how they win against certain matchups, who's playing them, what they're being played with, what their
What the
game
terrain
plan is,
was.
what the terrain is. There's so many external factors that win rate is not enough to draw conclusions on units, and that is something I stand by and will die on a hill for. So yeah, so it's kind of like I kind of do agree that it's again for me the line between a competitive and casual unit is when you can look at a unit and say this can handle everything that I expect someone to bring. Because, like for example, I'm thinking of like for rebels right now. Cassian kind of fits in that role very well because you know that Cassian can do work against Tempest. He can do work against clone gun lines. He can do work against like stuff like Jedi. He can do work against bikes. Like he does great with everything. And then like for example, when you pair him with Ahsoka and him have a lot of synergy together, and they can handle pretty much anything in the game. Um, that's kind of like what I think of when I look at competitive. So I don't think there is actually a difference between a competitive and a casual unit. It's about how you use them. Because it's not what you have; it's how you use it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's true. I think you can make decisions in game that will swing it one way or the other. Um, like as far as a competitive and a casual, like spoiler alert for anyone that's going to the Cincinnati event on Saturday, but I will be bringing swoop bikes, which are notoriously air quotes bad, that everyone has been saying is bad, and it's, why would you bring swoops? And so it's like, but we're going to see if I can make them work, because I found good success in them, besides the fact that people kind of yeah, just, I don't know, dig on them a little bit. Like I've had nothing but good success with the reps that I played with swoops.
yeah, I mean, and then like I'm doing the same thing because I'm bringing SX21 Rebel Troopers with captains, which are notoriously like always called really bad because they're like just a range 2 shotgun for Rebel Troopers. There's no reason to run them, a lot of people say, but I disagree, which is always fun.
So we've talked about competitive and casual units, competitive and casual list building. What about competitive and casual versus casual, like
Environments.
players and playing?
Yeah.
Um, like I think for me, our indie scene is pretty vibrant. I mean, even across like other communities that I see, we have a player base here on the south side, at least, of probably 40 to 60 players. Um, and so we have a fairly decent size scene, but I wouldn't say everyone considers themselves a competitive player. So I think the good question is kind of, how do you guys see balance between those two, like playing every week, like, and what's a good tips for both, like for others in the community who might be either a casual player or a competitive player, like showing up to your local store? How do you balance those two to where competitive players aren't just bringing the latest meta smash and smashing casuals, and vice versa? Like casuals want to show up and have a good time and play things, but have communities where they can bring lists that are new and fun and try things out and not have their head kicked in.
Yeah, so I think my answer is kind of in two parts here because I think a lot of it has to do with the environment and who you're playing against at the time, specifically like communication between them. In terms of like environments, it's very like there's difference in environments. Like I'm not calling Brian out here because I love Brian and I love coming to his house every Friday, but you go to his house and it is very very much a competitive environment. Like the goal there is to get better, to improve, to like keep like learning at the game and be like the best player you can, which isn't a bad thing. I totally enjoy it. There's a reason I go to his house and play 3 games every Friday night. Um, Usually. So yeah, but then it's like you go to, for example, our local store here on the south side, Game Preserve. It's you are going to play a game. You don't know what someone is bringing. You don't know like the skill level of players or anything like that. So you kind of have to like temper your expectation a little bit. And I think that's kind of like leads into my second point of communication is very important between players, and like that's like the number one thing. When you go to a tournament, everyone is there to win. Everyone knows that. When you go to like Brian's house, for example, everyone is kind of there to know that like okay, we're getting serious games, we're trying to improve, et cetera, et cetera. But when you go to something like Game Preserve, like your local store, you are kind of walking into like an unknown environment, so you don't know what to expect. So I think it's always best to temper your expectations and expect a more considered casual game, something that someone's just looking to push minis around, roll some dice, have some fun, which is what I think you kind of want to start tempering your list for. And then, of course, you can also have those conversations at your local stores if you want to look for a more competitive thing. Because I know that we are very spoiled here in Indy. I know, like, not a lot of people get the chance to go to someone's house and play 3 or 4 games of Legion, and like if they're looking for competitive games like that. So that's the kind of thing that you talk about with people when you go to your local store. Kind of deal. A good example I have of this, because I play Magic the Gathering as well, is power levels. One of the big things for for Magic the Gathering when you go to your local store is you sit down and you have a conversation before you even like start playing the game about power levels. You say, okay, I am bringing a high powered level deck or a medium power level deck or basically just like a starter deck, and that helps you set your expectations for the game. And that's the same thing you can do when you go to like local stores and stuff. You can be like, okay, I'm bringing a list that I want to bring to tournaments and improve with, and et cetera, et cetera. Or I am just bringing what I consider a fun list or a theme list and stuff like that. So I think number one thing for me is communication, and then follow it up with environment.
Nice. And I still think that even if I show up to and hopefully prepared to get crushed in Brian's basement, or if I show up and enjoy a fun game where nothing's on the line against someone who I may not even know yet, I think I can bring the same list of both. And you can determine your experience by, because it's such a social game, you can determine the experience by the, how you're talking to and what you're trying to get out of your opponent. For instance, when I'm playing hard, I don't talk very much. And so it pulls me away from the social aspect when I'm very focused on making the right decision, the right timing, analyzing what the opponent's doing, and not necessarily talking to them about it. So I think my tip, or at least what I've experienced, is I have so much more fun when I'm talking to my opponent, not only about the game, but about their experience on playing Legion, about what they do for fun. So I think when I'm casually playing, I'm talking to my opponent so much more than I am thinking about the game and thinking about how to win, and I'm thinking about how to have fun. And I think that's at least in my experience, and as I talk to other people, that's what brings people back, especially in public places. Of this has been a good experience. Playing the game and talking to people is a lot more. I think it entices people to do that more.
I agree with that fully. I think it's so much a social game, and communicating that expectation. And like half the time, I feel like, to me, I walk into whenever I walk into playing a Legion game anymore, unless it's a tournament, I usually, hey, what list do you want me to play? I've got these options, and I kind of, I say, okay, hey, and like, what are you thinking? What do you want to roll with? But even then, while we're playing it, like even if it is a competitive game, like I've had so many games at tournaments with high level players, and the whole game is quiet. And it's just not nearly as fun. Half the time, I mean, you guys know because you've played me enough to know that, like, I don't play this game quietly very much. Like, half the time I'm making sound effects, like when I'm driving speeders and like, there's so much, like, animated nonsense that goes through. And part of that is just comes from wanting the game to be fun and rooted and grounded to where even if it's serious, my opponent and I can still have a good time. Even if I'm, 10 points behind or whatever it is, I can still have a good time because we are here for that. And so I think keeping it social, keeping the communication flowing is key.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I know for like a fact, having played you, I don't think I've ever played a game against you where one of us isn't saying something, making a noise, etc., that kind of thing. Um, which is fun. And then it's like, of course, when it's like in the basement, when, like, for example, when we're in Brian's basement, it's always fun to be able to kind of like take a break from the game for a second and like kind of walk and watch someone else's game, for example.
Hmm.
Which does not happen at a competitive event kind of deal.
No, just the after action reports of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess one last thing for kind of like the line between competitive and casual and just in playing the game in general is one of the things that I've been kind of dealing with lately personally is burnout and getting bored with the game and
For
basically
sure.
trying to keep the game fresh. Um, so what ways, like, this is more for Matt than anyone because he's played the longest and has dealt with this probably the most out of any of us, is keeping the game fresh. How do you go about keeping the game fresh and making it continue to be fun and not just feel like the same thing over and over again?
I think that's a really great topic for a lot of people. And I think that there's a lot of people who either played the game as long as me, not played the game nearly as long as me, or have even like jumped in and jumped out and then jumped back in. Because people are in different places and like it's a hobby game and it's also, it's here for fun. And so people have different places where it's like, oh, well, maybe it was fun for a while, or maybe it wasn't, or maybe they even left entirely. And that's okay because it's, again, we're literally just here to have fun. So like finding kind of the rhythms, like especially because we're in a bit of a lull from releases right now. AMG has even said in the ministravaganza they're currently working on changing some of the old stuff, the old plastic stuff, to the updated plastic, and so that's kind of delayed a lot of their releases. Um, and so we're in a bit of a lull for new stuff. Like, CIS hasn't had new stuff since Asajj, and that was the new stuff since whatever. So I think finding different ways to mix things up has been key for me. I know we've done variants where it's like we played a 3-person game at one point, or we played doubles, or we um, changed fact. Like one of the things that we've talked about before, and I still want to do this. We haven't done this, where everyone shows up with a list, and then you just like, all right, let's spin the list around, and like whoever ends up with this, that's what you play. Like, oh, you don't know how to play CIS? Well, sorry, this is just a random thing that I built because I don't really know how to play CIS either. And so I guess we're rolling with that tonight. And so finding ways to keep it fun, to keep it interesting, and to keep kind of the minds engaged. Like, that's what I love about Legion is figuring out the puzzle box. And so sometimes we just need ways to view the puzzle box from a different side to keep our minds going and engaged in a way that's new and interesting.
What do you mean by the puzzle box? Just like how like the game plays and everything?
Yeah, and also like, to me, I really enjoy Rebels because there's so many command card tricks. That's part of the reason why I played them for so long, and part of it is trying to figure out, all right, what's the timing of this that I have to play it? When I play it here, how does this interact with that unit? How does it, how do I maximize this movement to get to this objective, or how do I? And so for me, like Legion is mostly trying to solve the Rubik's cube of if how do I get all the colors that I need to line up on one side to make sure that things fall into place.
Yeah. So no, I agree with a lot of that because that's kind of what I've been experiencing personally a lot is that the easiest way to make the game feel fresh again is just playing a new Battle Force or not playing a new Battle Force, playing a new faction or
Yeah.
the style of play. because it just makes you think about it differently. And then this is kind of thing I've experienced also with like in like at life with like sports and everything and like other like video games and the like, is that like usually when you take a break from something for a while, whatever it is, and then come back to it, it's fun again. It's very refreshing. You
Absolutely.
just like just get better at it because you're starting to think about it again, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
Keeler, if you haven't played XCOM 2, Adam and I are both seasoned veterans of XCOM 2.
well,
So
that's
that's,
I rage quit so hard at an XCOM 2 multiplayer game. So I have, and my buddy Austin knows, I have a soft spot because I've had such bad luck at that game. But I would love to be beat at XCOM as well.
Wow,
So
Slaver's the only person I've ever met who has more hours in that game than I do.
here. Let me pull up my Steam really quick, just so everyone knows. So I have the new edition on Steam. So this isn't even like all of my hours, but
I have a problem. I own it on 3 consoles. It's fine.
I have 853 hours logged on Steam on the like the new edition or whatever.
right.
And then there's probably another 300 to 400 on Xbox and stuff. So no, I have been burned a fair few times by the fact that 98% chance to hit means 0% chance to hit.
Yep.
So that's always fun.
Oh,
Um,
that's funny.
all right. I think now is time
But yeah,
for.
if you don't mind, I'd like to say something too on
yeah, go
burnout.
ahead.
So like for me, approaching the game right now, everything is, I'm still learning. I'm still learning a whole lot, and I have a sports background as well, and so when I approach a game like this where you determine your success by a W or an L, right? It's either a win or a loss. What helps keeping, if you're looking to get better and do better tournaments and things like that, changing your thinking from like outcome based to process based, if you're in the process of trying to get better, is a huge help. And I can talk about golf. I've played golf a lot, but if you're looking to break 80, or if you have this thing you're trying to do, you don't want to think about that while you're playing it. You want to think about what it is that will get you there. And then that should be your goal while playing the game. So I think for me, when I'm playing Legion and I'm playing like Anakin right now, or if I'm playing Padme, that's what I'm playing right now. And I think about what am I trying to do with those units and what things will get me there to get me the win, and not I'm chasing after a win. And I think that will help you not only do better, but or learn to do better with those characters, but it'll just prevent someone from being disappointed from time and time again, whether it's at a tournament or whether it's if you're just having fun, right? Either way, you see that loss and it's just like crushing. But if you've successfully done something with that character, like scored a secret mission with Padme, like I got one the other day, I was like super happy, right? That's the process. I was like, hey, I did that. I got my victory point out of that character. I didn't win, but I made that step. I made that improvement, and that helps not make it feel like you're going nowhere.
I think that's a really, really good insight, Kaler. I think that's part of the reason why, when I run events, we started introducing and having great success with the bounty boards, is because we see so many players who they want to shoot so hard for that win, and then they get crushed if they don't get it, or they get crushed if they get 2 losses.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. It's a horrible experience to kind of navigate. Because all of us want to be there for the win. And so it's, what I wanted to do is introduce with the bounty boards. It's a way to keep focusing on those small steps of progress, of whether it's, getting the most vehicle kills or getting the most, trying to find something else to focus on those steps to keep people engaged, to keep them in the game, and to keep them continue to grow. And so even with all the events we've run, you see those players by the 3rd or 4th game that they're in there, they have made huge leaps in the way that they're playing. Even as me just walking around as the TO, I can tell that like end of the day versus the beginning of the day, they are a much more fine-tuned machine. Even if they've got 2 or 3 losses, it's because they're focused on making those next few steps, and they're crazy. They're still powering through it, and they're focused on something. So,
and you're also going home with something, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's really
yeah.
cool with the way you run your
100%.
tournaments, is because you're leaving with something by accomplishing your goal. And whether it wasn't a win, you're still making great improvements of becoming a better player.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think that was great conversation for competitive versus casual. Let's move on to something potentially a little less constructive. A segment we're calling hot seat. So this is
Ooh.
something we're gonna do for hopefully all the episodes coming up. We're gonna put one person in the hot seat. So this week it's gonna be Matt. He's gonna give us a topic, some hot take in Legion. Matt's got a fun one for today. But basically, we're going to sit here for 10 15 minutes. Matt's going to try and defend his point, and Kaler and we're going to sit here and tell Matt why he's wrong. And
Yes.
then, so hopefully not only will it be fun for us to kind of yell at each other a little bit, but give you a bit more of an insight into whatever topic, hot take that Matt has decided to come up with us. So,
All right.
Matt, what is your hot take for
All right, so my hot take might be pretty fiery for this week, or it could be pretty tame. I don't know. That depends on where you sit, I guess. But I think overrun is actually a really underutilized, extremely volatile keyword, particularly on swoop bikes. But we're going to see it as well in the new Wookiee Battle Force. I think overrun is going to be a menace.
Okay, I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes, and then we'll go from there and see where this gets us. We'll see if we might do a thing where it's you can say who was correct at the episode and comment or whatever. We will see. But all right, so 15 minutes starts now. So why you are wrong. Overrun we see on Floodcraft, as you said. We see it on swoop bikes. I think we potentially might see it on the new Genius and units, which we'll talk about next episode, I think. So the main problem for me with overrun is that the mechanic requires you to move over someone. You have to for overrun to work, your base has to travel across your opponent's base. And on these units, specifically the Fluttercraft and the swoops, they are extremely, extremely fragile. They will die in one shot, kind of deal. So the reason I don't like overrun, and I think overrun is bad, is because you can set it up all you want. Your platform is going to die before you can get it off. I think.
Disagree.
Why?
I think so. One, let's particularly talk about swoop bikes. Swoop bikes have cover 1, and they pretty much get a free dodge almost every single turn. Well, every single round, I should say. They also can move 3 times. They're extremely fast, and particularly you can pair them well with melee units. So when you're tying things up, like for say, I don't know, in Rebels, a bunch of Ewoks that are melee centric just dropped that are really cheap. It's a really great way to kind of shut down your opponent in a melee and still add wounds to that melee safely, I might add, because you are not being shot back by the units that are tied up.
Well, okay. So
did I just win? Did I win the argument?
That is fair. Well, that is fair.
Stop the timer.
You are looking at swoop bikes, for example. Their overrun attack is 1 red and 2 white. You're adding in maybe a hit and a half on average. And then, you got your defense saves and everything. So, I don't think it's a reliable way to actually, for the points cost of the effect, I don't think it's a reliable way to actually add in those wounds. Sure, I agree it's safely because, you're not getting shot back. But I don't think it's effectively adding wounds back because can you use aims on overrun attacks? I thought you couldn't.
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I thought you could, but I could be wrong. I think to counter that, though, I think the fact that you can overrun twice is a big deal. So you're throwing yes, it's only 3 dice at 1 unit, but you can actually throw 6 there. and they can also shoot if you set it up, which is another 4 dice if they haven't taken wounds, particularly on the swoops. And so you're actually adding a lot of value there by being able to throw dice at multiple units. They chip extremely well, meaning they're going to take 2 wounds over here on this unit that they shot at, and maybe a wound or 2 on the unit they overran. And then if they do it again, maybe it's another wound. And so they can just zoom around and really whittle things down as whatever your melee units or whatever else is, kind of hitting at stuff, which for rebels with smaller dice pools is really good. And especially when everything's locked in with Wookiees with the new NASP, I think that's really good as well.
I think when you said it was really important here, you said if you set it up, and I think that's a huge driver for me because a lot has to go right for you to get those results. And so I think for me, approaching Overrun keyword as someone who's never done it before, the amount of games that I would have to play in order to get what you just said, setting it up, would be a huge curve for me. And so I think from that perspective, do you think it's just worth taking something a lot easier to set up than bringing in that Overrun?
Yes, I do. I think it very much is for the points cost, because Overrun is bad.
Ooh, I see. Points cost. I mean, swoops are 70 points. They're 65. They're one of the cheapest speeder units there is. They move extremely fast. And here's one of the biggest perks of swoops in particular. Their gun is not fixed front. Their gun is 360. And so you can kind of set up the overruns and still have forgiveness with that pistol.
The black and white pistol?
Black and red.
Black and red.
It's two reds, 2 blacks.
Yeah, but
certain hits.
There's
and
no
you can get 3 aims.
There's no sharpshooter or anything.
No, it's not. But that's okay when you can get free aims when you need it.
I will say the one thing that is nice about swoop bikes that I agree with is that they do have reinforcements. They have reinforcements. So there is. So while I do agree that it is easier to set up because reinforcements makes it. So
you need to add like a little X to Adam's head because I've won my side.
But I think even with that, it's still too hard to set up because I think because of how cover and terrain and everything works, and in most scenarios, you're not going to be able to hide these swoop bikes. They're not going to. You're still going to, for them to be effective, they still got to be really, really freaking close. And I think that's just going to take too much time to set up and have that be worthwhile.
I think maybe that's the thing that most people are running into is they try to fly them in rounds 2 or 3. If you wait till late game, they are like turn 3 and 4 is usually when I really turn them on. You want to fly in the flanks, and then you want to start going ham. Yeah, you can take some shots and hit the sides. Like, if you're playing battle lines and your opponent's got a gun line, you can hit the weak sides turn 2, and then you start coming in. And you just kind of slowly come in. And it's actually surprisingly easy to bring them in if you have other, like in Shadow Collective. If you're playing swoop bikes and Maul, they're probably going to be focused on Maul. Like just they have to be, especially if there's Black Sun or there's pikes backing them up. And so they've got time to come in and really hit hard because if they're worried about swoop bikes, guess what? Black Sun is going to, just turn on the heat. Here comes 12 dice.
See, I would say this conversation is a little hard for me because I am on Matt's side, and I was before the topic started. So it's made it a little difficult for me to come up with points against it. But I still think they're bad, and it's wrong, and you're wrong. You got anything, Caleb?
No, I can't. I just, like I said, I think for the majority of players out there, I still think you're going to find that there's going to be such a learning curve for the unit and the keyword that you're going to get so much more value out of something that's easier to pilot. I think of League when I think of this. I've played a lot of League of Legends, unfortunately. But like as an ADC and I'm playing like Ezreal or a skill shot champion, tons of potential for damage. Right? It's great. It can be amazing, but you got to hit it. Right? You got to have the skill to perform. And I just know for myself as a pilot, there's no way I'm going to take a bark every time because it's pretty reliable.
Ooh, that's my other. I want to swoops over barks, man. Yeah.
Okay, now you're actually wrong. Because they do, like, they fill the same role. And I think barks do it better.
So here's my thing. And now this is where the community is really going to roast me. You with a bark, you can't fire support off of a bark into a unit, leave 1 or 2 minis alive, and then overrun it to finish the unit off if you don't kill it all the way. You can do that with a swoop. Surge to hit pool, 4 dice, a free aim, zoom up, shoot it, or you can get a second aim if you need. Shoot it, fire support it, and then overrun it to try and finish it off.
Or hear me out. You could be a good player and kill it in one shot and just roll better. No, but actually though, I do think specifically with barks versus swoops, I think it is very, very likely that you can set up a fire support that will actually like kill the unit. Maybe not for like rebels and stuff because all you got there is a Mark II, but like with specifically clones, you should be killing that unit in your fire support with the bark.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and hear me out. There's only a 10-point difference now, and with a bark, you have to equip upgrades if you want to get extra dice. A swoop, you do not. 65 points, free tokens. You get to throw. Usually, if you figure out the kit, you're throwing a minimum of 7 dice around. That's not including fire support. And free tokens every turn.
That is true. Okay.
What's the point system? I feel like I'm winning.
No, I will digress in that I've gotten a little distracted by the fact that I've become more upset with Kaler because he is an ADC main. So there's that. I'm distracted. I don't have much else to add on that. I do like as I said, it is hard because overrun I think is good. It's just hard to properly use. I think that's the number one thing.
So I didn't realize how good overrun was until I had to play it at Rocky Top, and I had a triple NASP player throw like, oh my gosh, so much suppression on me. Because you can overrun multiple times and each one is suppressive. And so I'm locked in melee and I've got all these units with like 3 suppression on them because he's overrun me twice and then he stepped on me with the compulsory because those things are just monsters. So I think overrun is very underutilized.
I'll say the one thing there is that you don't get that with swoops because swoops don't have suppressive on their overrun attacks.
Correct. But with the NASP, you do.
Yeah. Okay. If Kaler, do you have anything else on overrun?
I can't stand up to Matt. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've got
this much less. It is my throne now. No throne.
All right. Well, I will come and take that from you next episode. Don't worry. Okay. Shall we round it all off with the 2 new battle forces? Because I have some thoughts about these battle forces.
But hold on, I think we need to ask Kaler, as the only clone player main of the 3 of us, how excited he is for Wookiees.
I will say I don't own a single Wookiee miniature.
Well, goodbye, Kaler. It's been nice having you on the podcast.
After playing you for the first time, when you ran your Wookiees right into my battle, like right into Anakin and just punched him up, I learned the value. You can't underestimate them. And now there's going to be how many out there?
6 of them.
How many?
6 of them.
Well, hold on. You can actually run 10 of them.
You could run 10 of them. So, okay. So,
it's melee.
So, let me run through the rules really quick before we continue talking about Wookiee defenders. So, Galactic Republic. Well, I just want everyone to know what we're talking about, so everyone understands how stupid this is. Um, so for this new battle force, obviously it's Galactic Republic. For the rules in this is that a Wookiee defenders unit, so the melee Wookiees, counts as a core unit for list building purposes. That could have been the only thing I said, and this battle force is already like S tier in my head.
Yeah.
Your army must include at least 3 Wookiee trooper units, and then the kicker on top: the first time a miniature in each Wookiee trooper unit is defeated each round, that unit may make a speed 1 move. So you kill this Wookiee, and like your whole game plan against Wookiees is to kill them before they reach you. But now, when you kill them, they can move even closer. Which I digress. Um, allowed units is Yoda, Chewbacca, Wookiee Chieftain for commanders, and then 0 to 1 ARC troopers, no strike teams, and then Wookiee warriors, up to phase 2s, and then up to 1 bark speeder, any amount of fluttercraft, and then you can have up to 1 infantry support platform and up to 1 saber tank.
And it is worth noting that the Fluttercraft is a new specific card for them.
Yeah. And then for list building, pretty much the same as before, except now you can take up to 4 special forces units, so you can have up to 4 of those shooty Wookiees, and then only 1 heavy unit, so you can only have 1 tank instead of 2. And then for the new Fluttercraft card, costs 2 points more, which very, very much disturbs me because I don't like it being 57 points, which is weird. So it's got pretty much the same profile as before, except now it has attack run, which is at the start of this unit's activation, you may increase or decrease its speed by up to 1 until the end of its activation. So this Floodcraft is basically going speed 3 now. And then everything else is the same.
Which actually, kind of what we were saying before with the overrun stuff is actually a benefit sometimes to put it in speed 1 to kind of slow roll it at the beginning if you pull it early, or that's actually a huge perk for that thing because it has a ginormous base.
Yeah, because and then speed 3, it's gross. Because it's gross. That's all I got on that.
It's a T-47 now. You're welcome.
Yeah. So, Wookiees are strong because
They seem good. They're definitely not unbeatable. As I played against them twice now. One list I played 2 games against it. Brian and I kind of tested it out and saw some stuff. There's definitely a lot of ways you can build this battle force, which I'm a huge fan of already. Like I think Blizzard Force in particular is kind of a list style that most people are bringing like one of 2 things. You either bring Vader with a lot of bikes, or you bring an ATST with a lot of bikes. There are several builds that I've seen for this already, which is awesome, that you can have a lot of kind of modality in how you build this list.
Your thoughts, Kaler? I didn't mean to cut you off before to read. I just wanted everyone to make sure.
Yeah, I think I have more of a question. If you start to see this, what should you look out for on objectives? Like what does this battle force? Because I've yet to play against it. I'm excited to see it, but like, what does this battle force want to do well when it comes to objectives, deployments, stuff like that?
That's a really good question. I think for the most part, most of that puzzle to me lies in the fact that it can speed 1 move towards you whenever you defeat a mini. Right. So this army wants to bum rush you as quick as they can. Wookiees, for the most part, most of your core is going to be melee. They want to get in there. So if you're a gun line, the last thing you want is something that you have to get your people to the center very quickly. Things like recover the supplies, hostage exchange, even payload. Something that you're going to have to move, you do not want to play this army with, because they're going to move quicker. They're going to want to be running straight at your face. And so I think for a lot of gun lines, that Wookiee charging ball is going to be a nightmare.
So I want to point out one thing I just noticed about this, in that for the special rules, the melee Wookiees count as core units for purposes of armor building and list building. But what that means is in game, there's other special forces tokens. So you can realistically build this army out so that it has 2 commanders and like 10 special forces tokens,
And
which
if you put
is
out 1 to your commander, you have full order control, like a
yeah,
droid online.
yeah. That's the thing that I was noticing, and I think that is very like that is scary, personally.
The scariest thing to me is like people who've bought all of the 3D or the third party order tokens, and now you're like, well, how do I get
I,
my hands on 10 special forces?
that is the other thing I was thinking about, and that I have to find all my cardboard tokens and find the 7 special forces tokens I have.
Yep.
But yeah, I think this
Yeah.
is gross.
I think it's a really cool, fun list that has lots of room to be broken. We could see, I could see this going one of 2 ways, where the community kind of finds a niche like they did with Blizzard Force that just is really overtuned and kind of will need some hands and some eyes on it.
That
Uh,
is, yeah,
or it will be kind of just on the edge of it, kind of like how 501st is really kind of on the edge of being a little too much, but it has been not winning enough games or being as oppressive as it could be to where it really needed hands. So because I think, we've workshopped a few different lists. There's one where you play as many Wookiees as you can possibly fit, either with or without guns. I think you can max out at like 12 Wookiees or something, like 12 act Wookiees or something like that. Crazy. You can also run it with a bunch of NASPs, like to overrun. And if you've got, all this Wookiee charging ball that gets in there, then you get the overruns that kind of start zooming in. Or you can just run it like a straight ball. I think actually Ty from the north side tried it with 6 melee Wookiees with shields and Yoda. And Yoda enables that play so well. So like every Wookiee, if you've got shields, is going to have heavy cover and armor for those first shots as they get in. Yoda allows them to move extra times. If you actually defeat a mini, oh no, that unit gets to move towards you even more. And you can even throw barrier on Yoda to just stop wounds. And so you just have basically a mosh pit of health that wants to run at you and throw a lot of dice once they get there. So
yeah, you can do Yoda with burst speed, force push, and force barrier, and 6 Wookiee warriors with battle shields for a grand total of 7 acts and 800 points.
hey, look at that, it fits.
It's so gross. I think that's kind of the one thing that I am worried about with Wookiee defenders, is that I feel like it might become very similar to Tempest on the competitive scene, in that it is a gatekeeper list. Because you either have a way to, like, for example, with Tempest, you either have a way to deal with 3 ATSTs, or you lose.
Or you don't.
Also, kind of like how Double Darts was when they were popular. You either have a way to deal with 7 to 9 melee units charging you and ripping your limbs off, or you don't, and you lose.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I think I do see it very much, and I like that Kaler has brought in video game analogies. It's because I think of Overwatch when it first launched, and the meta list was like 3 healers and 3 tanks.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you just like, all right, get through the wall. You can't, haha, we win.
Yeah. Kaler, you have any other thoughts on this?
No, I'm excited to see it. I just, like I said, I'm a little scared, to be honest.
Yes.
Scared. But it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
I do have to say, since we had the casual competitive, the fanboy in me is like so excited to put this many Wookiees on the table. Like, there's so many people. Like, Brent is over the moon right now.
I imagine.
He just messaged us tonight that he now has 10 boxes of Wookiees. So
you don't even need that many, because you can build multiple units out of 1 box.
Well, I think he said he's got enough for 10. I don't know that he's got 10 boxes, but he's got enough for 10 units of Wookiees.
It can be pretty gross. I agree with that. If I can find all my Wookiees, I might bring that on our Saturday tournament.
Oh
Nice.
no.
Because I've got like half of them are like split up everywhere. Because like half of them are painted and everything because they're my melee Wookiees that I always use in Rebels. The other half are the ranged Wookiees that I never used. um, so we will see. That'll be fun. Yeah,
And
I
there was
guess
another battle force.
there was another battle force. I think this one is supposed to be themed around the CIS invasion part of it,
Yes.
but I don't. Okay, so I will say I really don't completely agree with that, just because they don't have spider droids in this battle force, which is stupid because there were definitely spider droids on Sheik. But okay, so before anything else, let me read through the special rules because this is a doozy, to say the least. So part of the Separatist Alliance faction. Magna Guards count as core units for purposes of army building battle cards. Before anyone freaks out, there's a new special unit card for them, so they're not the stupid OP stuff that they are right now.
Phew.
So then, for the next special rule, at the start of each activation phase, choose up to one of your commander units. If you do, put 3 search tokens on that unit's unit card. Once during its activation, a friendly Special Forces, Core, or support unit that has the AI keyword may perform a free action to spend a surge token on the chosen commander unit card, if it is at range 3. If it does, it can choose one of the following. You increase the speed by 1 for their next move action in this turn. You gain 1 aim token or 1 dodge token. You add 1 black die and 1 white die into their attack pool during the next attack action this turn. Or you remove up to 2 suppression tokens. The important thing to note with what I just said is that the search tokens go on the unit card, not on the unit. So you can stack these up across rounds. So you can end up with like 12 tokens round 4 on your commander card if you want to.
Yeah, that part's kind of gross.
Yeah.
They've clarified that it basically kind of works like cash.
Yeah, it's basically cash.
So
Okay. So allowed units, commanders you can take super tactical droids, which they've clarified to also include Kalani and Kraken, not just the generic. You can take T series, special forces. You can take the BXs with no strike teams. You can take the Magna Guard, the prototype versions. You can take up to 2 B1 droids, up to 2 B2s. You can take Droidicas, and you can take the prototype Persuader class tank, the snail tank. It's basically also the same list building requirements. So like you got your up to 2 commanders, 6 core, all that's the same. So for the new cards, the Persuader tank, same points cost. You lose a couple things in that you lose open transport, which is kind of a big hit, I think. But you also say you lose. I've got them side by side here. So you lose that. You gain command node, which is basically direct at range 1. So during the command phase, this unit may issue an order to a core unit at range 1. You still have the weak point 1 sides and everything. It gains also Arsenal 3. So you can shoot with both of its main weapons and the rockets. You do lose a 1 white die and impact 1 on the range 2 gun. Not the biggest deal because you're adding in rockets. But yeah, pretty much the same outside of that. Same points cost and everything. Then you got the new Magna Guard, which are only 60 points. So if AI dodge move and charge and immune melee pierce and unhindered, you do lose retinue, which is important. You also lose Guardian. And then the big part is that they only have 1 HP each, but they gain an extra model. So it's a 4-man unit with 1 HP each.
I think that's disgusting.
Yeah. They also, I will say though, also they do lose their melee dice goes from black to black white, and they do lose surge to hit. So
which I think is important because I think I've noticed a lot of chatter on the Magna Guards both ways. Some people think they're terrible, some people think they're broken. And so I think the key thing is they have less health. They don't get their free tokens, but they throw like two more extra dice,
Mhm.
which is not nothing, especially when you can run four of these suckers now. And so they hit with those rockets that still have critical one pretty hard.
yeah, I think. And the other thing is that like you can work around like their lower health and everything too by bringing two snail droids, which is probably what I would do personally. I think double snail is really gross in this, um, because they
Yeah.
also are massive line of sight blockers, and they
Well, technically, oh, you can run two heavies.
yeah you can this one is the same for list building Kashyyyk
Okay, I
order.
was looking at the skirmish ranking for a minute.
Yeah,
Yep, you're right.
so I think you run that and then you run like a snail droid and like four magnas and then like two B2s or something along those lines, something gross.
Hmm.
Because you end up just blocking line of sight and everything just moves up freely, so you get those bigger dice pools pretty much for free.
Yeah, and you do have the super attack in there so that you can override when you need to on those magnas to get an aim and not have
And
to AI dodge.
or you then you just spend your tokens from the card, and they increase your speed by one for their first move, and they're charging you range 2.5, 2.3, I think it was actually 2.33 ish. So
Blah,
yeah, good times.
blah.
um,
This will make Spencer happy.
It, it will. It will.
I do think this one is pretty good too. I think this one has more. I'm not gonna say more potential, because I think it is a much more one dimensional list.
Yeah, I
Uh,
am very curious to see the different lists for this. I think unlike the Wookiee one, this one, yeah, like you said, has a couple of different styles it wants to play. But I don't think it has nearly the flexibility that Wookiee list have, where you can kind of play it in a lot of different ways. I think this is mostly going to be spam as many Magna droids as you can. Maybe I take a snail, maybe I don't.
I do think also, but my favorite part about this is that I think that BX droids have the ability to absolutely pop off in this battle force because of the extra things you're getting. So, like, if you're just sitting at range 5 and just taking your sniper shots, you're getting a sniper shot with lethal 1 and 2 red, a black, and a white. Surge hit and everything. So like that sniper shot, it's doing a lot of work on ironically.
Hmm.
And then you just stick on vibro swords on them, and they get their increased charge range and everything.
Yeah,
Um,
I think all those extra rules are important as to why there's no open transport anymore.
yes,
So on that snail.
I do agree with that as well. Um, I think I'm definitely gonna if I'm running this, I'm definitely running it with two BX droids because I think they sound like the most fun. But
It's funny. I was listening to, I think it was Tim Hannon from the Stabcast was talking about if you want to run Droidicas, that's a good option in this list too, because Droidicas, you increase your speed, you get those aims, you get those dodges, you do all the yeah, I mean even extra dice, like really not bad if you want to run, you know, three Droidicas that are now can move out of ball mode at speed 2. Like, great. They move up there, they get into position, and now they can just turret with extra dice and aims.
so you can run. Yeah, I think Dragos are aggressive in this, but as a BX lover myself, you can run Kalani with improvise, and then two BX droids with their sniper and vibro swords, two B2 hats, 2 units of B1s with the E5S, and then two of the weird Magnas with their rocket launcher for
That's their name.
9x 795.
Weird Magnus.
The weird Magnas. So I am. This one I'm actually a little bit more excited for than the Kashyyyk one actually, like because I am a sucker for BX droids. I think that brings us to an hour 10 minutes. I think that's a good spot. Unless we've got anything
Yeah, I
else
think
we want to
unless
talk
you guys
about.
have other things, I think we've covered quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As always, keep up with our blog and everything. YouTube. Feel free to check us out anywhere else. Hopefully,
Check us out on the Facebook, on the Discord, and on our website at IndianapolisGarrison.com.
Then I guess if there's nothing else, I think
Taylor has to give us some life
I would say
advice.
I was like, would love to
The
know.
life advice.
Taylor, I just don't know how to live my life. Tell me. I need tips.
I will say, if you're anything like me or something I've experienced, those overly brown bananas in the corner of your kitchen, just compost them. Just compost them. You know, we're not going to make the banana bread that you're saying that you're going to make. So
Well, now I feel called out. We'll leave it there.
Banana bread will never happen, Adam. Just give it up.
Okay.